Hi, I'm Celia Hatton, and welcome to the BBC's Global News podcast on YouTube, where we go behind the headlines to focus on one story and why it matters. Today, we're taking a look inside Russia at its people and its leader, Vladimir Putin, 4 years into the war with Ukraine. Joining me is the BBC's Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, in Moscow. Steve Rosenberg, thank you so much for joining us. In a few moments, I want to ask you what's going on inside Vladimir Putin's mind. But first, you're one of the few Western journalists in Russia speaking to a whole host of Russian people on the lead up to this 4-year anniversary. I wonder if you could tell us about some of them.
It's still possible, yes, for us to travel around Russia, to visit towns and villages, and to speak to people. And so recently we went to a region called Lipetsk region, which is kind of halfway between Moscow and the Ukrainian border. And, chatting to people on the street, I was asking people, what worries them most of all about their lives. And almost everybody said prices and communal bills, electricity, heating, that kind of thing. That's the first concern people have because everything is becoming much more expensive. So, for example, I spoke to a lady called Irina in the town of Yelets. She works as a ticket collector at the local bus station. She doesn't earn very much. She earns about $250 a month, the equivalent. And about half of that she now spends on utility bills, which doesn't leave very much for food. And we were hearing that from everybody. As far as the war is concerned, you get the feeling there is this fatigue with the war and a great deal of concern about the number of Russian soldiers who've been killed over the last 4 years. So Irina told me that the husband of her friend had been killed fighting in Ukraine. The son of her cousin had been killed, and she said her grandson. She helps people who are fighting on the front line. She sends aid packages to them. But when I mentioned to her that the so-called special military operation, the war in Ukraine, has now lasted longer than the Soviet Union's fight against Nazi Germany, what's known as the Great Patriotic War here, she said, yes, but in the Great Patriotic War, we knew what we were fighting for. I'm not sure what we're fighting for now. I thought that was fascinating because here is someone who wasn't criticizing the war in Ukraine, someone who actually helps Russian soldiers with aid packages, but admitting that she doesn't quite understand what this is all for. And I think I get the feeling that that is the case with many people, that they don't openly criticize the war, they don't oppose it, they don't go onto the streets with placards to say down with the war, but they haven't understood why the Russian authorities are waging this war.
Steve, do you get the sense that people are connecting the dots, that they are linking the social and economic challenges they're facing with the war?
Not everybody. Clearly, everything is getting more expensive. And partly that is the result, or to a large extent, that is the result of the war and 4 years of international sanctions. One man, Ivan, said to me, I think the special military operation is a great thing. It's just I don't like the fact that prices are going up. And they put my pension up, then the prices go up even more. So I don't get anything in the end. So he wasn't connecting the dots. What I've noticed is that the messaging in the state media over the last 4 years has been directed at preventing people from joining the dots, preventing people from saying, well, our economic situation is getting worse as a result of the decision that our government took in 2022 to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So what the messaging tries to do is to put all the blame on the West, on NATO, on Europe, on Britain, and to say that if life is getting worse in Russia for you, it's not because of the Kremlin, it's because of the evil West that is trying to destroy Russia.
So we've talked about what the Russian people are thinking, but let's talk about the man himself, Vladimir Putin. What do you think he's thinking at this point in the war?
Well, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It's difficult to get inside the head of the Russian president. However, whenever he appears on television, making a speech or putting on, military fatigues and speaking to his commanders, he seems confident, right? He seems particularly excited and animated when he's talking about the war. And he creates the impression of a Kremlin leader who believes that he has the initiative in this war and that eventually he's going to win. Now, that may seem strange considering that this war went completely not according to plan for Vladimir Putin. This was supposed to have been a special military operation lasting days or weeks maximum. I don't think President Putin envisaged this as a long term war, but it is a war. It didn't go to plan. And Russia has suffered huge casualties, major economic effects. Yet Vladimir Putin, is confident that in what has become a war of attrition, Russia will win. That Russia has more resources, he believes, than Ukraine. Russia has the staying power and the willpower, much more than Europe. He sees divisions in Europe between European leaders about how to approach this. And of course, he looks to Washington. He looks to the White House and he sees in the Oval Office an American president who clearly wants a better relationship with Russia, someone who has held many telephone conversations with Vladimir Putin over the last year, someone who invited Vladimir Putin to Alaska, remember last year for that summit, rolling out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, bringing him in from the cold. So he puts all that together. And I think he believes that in the long term, if he pushes on, then he will get what he wants. So the next question is, what does he want?
Can you answer that?
Well, I think that his objective hasn't changed. I think that 4 years ago, this was all about forcing Ukraine back into Moscow's orbit, number one. And number two, in so doing, to sort of upturn or revamp the European security infrastructure, the European security system. And I don't think that's changed. So I don't think, can imagine Ukraine outside of Russia's influence. Even if the war ends at some point with a peace deal, I would imagine that the Russian authorities will be keen to, at some point, diplomatically, politically, somehow, to bring the Ukraine back into the fold. Whether that's going to be possible, that's another matter entirely.
How would you assess Russia's access to resources at this point, in order to reach that end goal? Does Russia have the resources to achieve its goals?
This is a key question, isn't it? If we think of Vladimir Putin as a car, hurtling down the highway, right? I often see him as like the Putin-mobile, without a steering wheel, without a brake, just heading in one direction. The question is, how much gas does he have in the tank? How much petrol is there? How much money is there in the Russian economy? Because you need money, obviously, and resources to fight a war. And there's no doubt that the Russian economy is entering a very turbulent time. And it's not just me saying that, it's the Russian papers. If you read the Russian newspapers, and I try and do that on a daily basis, even in a very controlled media landscape that Russia is now, Russian newspapers almost on a daily basis talk about the major economic problems that this country is facing, the budget deficit, the pressure on businesses, the fact that the word stagnation is used so often now to talk about the economy, spud, recession. And what we're seeing is that after 4 years of war and 4 years of massive international sanctions, there are major problems that are affecting the Russian economy and affecting how much money Vladimir Putin has to continue the war. At the moment, he can. There's no doubt he has the resources. But will he have the resources if this continues for 6 months, a year and a half? He seems to be confident that he will, but certainly it feels like this is going to be quite a bumpy year.
I wonder if we can end on a bit of a focus on you. I mean, what's it like for you as the BBC's Russia editor to go in and out of Russia, to have conversations inside Russia, to observe the messaging as you talked about in the Russian state media, and then to leave Russia and have conversations and to see it from another vantage point?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Sometimes it feels, being here, like you're in this very kind of unusual bubble, and to an extent in this sort of parallel reality, because when you switch on the television, you're told that Russia is liberating Ukraine and liberating Ukrainian towns and cities, that Russia is not the aggressor, that Russia is the victim of Western aggression, that the West is somehow trying to destroy Russia, chop Russia into bits. So it's a very different message from the message you hear outside of Russia. So when I leave Russia and I go back to the UK for a bit or somewhere else, then you switch on the television there, and it's a very different message. But then you come back, and then again you have this sort of message that black is white and white is black. I want to be here and I want to cover what's going on. I think it's important to be here. And it's important to understand, I think, what the leadership is saying and what Russian people are saying. Because, Russia's not going anywhere, is it? Biggest country in the world, a nuclear superpower. Despite what anyone may think about Russia, it's here to stay. So I think it's important to try to understand what's going on here.
Steve, we're so grateful that you are in Moscow. And we're so grateful to have your input and your conversation with us today. So thanks for speaking with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure.
The BBC's Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg in Moscow. Now, if you liked this episode, do please subscribe to us here on YouTube. And if you'd like us to cover any other stories, please leave a comment below. You can hear more international news on the BBC's Global News podcast. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. Bye-bye.